Well, thank you, colleagues, and congratulations, Jude. It's absolutely fantastic. And to win the award named after one of my political heroes and one of the heroes of local government, Sandy Bruce Lockhart, is an amazing honour that I know that you feel. And there's now a succession of Bruce Lockhart Award winners who collectively, there are probably some in the room today, who constitute some of our most innovative people in local government. And I wonder whether, Jude, you would come with them into the department to talk to my ministerial team and the Permanent Secretary to advise us on how we can make sure that we're as innovative as you clearly are. It would be great if you would do that. We can get some advice from you. Well, David, Gary, colleagues, it's fantastic to be here. I'm grateful for the warmth of your reception throughout this week, and I'm looking forward immensely to working with you during the months and years ahead. Not all of us in this room share the same politics, but we do share a common cause. We all agree that local government has the ability to transform the prospects not just of our cities, towns and counties and our districts, but of the whole country. That powers annexed by central government over decades should be returned to local government, and that the time for that change is now. We believe that, and we've always believed that. But what's special about this moment is that we're no longer the only ones who believe that. Born-again localists are appearing everywhere. They're appearing in Westminster, they're appearing in the media, they're appearing in Whitehall, even, would you believe it, in the Treasury. It's worth considering what's behind this change of heart, because it's not just a matter of sentiment, it's one of hard-headed judgment. As we recover from the recession and look to the future, it's clear that for our country to succeed to the maximum, to fulfill the potential that we have, then every part of the country needs to be successful, not just London, not just the Southeast. And since no two places are the same, South Holland, I'm sure Gary would agree, could never be confused with Dudley, nor Cornwall with Middlesbrough, it should be obvious that a central plan for everywhere won't work anywhere. To have ministers and officials calling the shots from the centre is to miss out on the local knowledge, the drive, the connections, the leadership that only local government can give. And I think this change of heart is also a testament and a recognition of the achievements of local government over the last 5 years in particular. You have absorbed, as we know, some of the biggest cuts that had to be made. That was inevitable, given that local government accounts for around 25% of public spending. But what was not inevitable, but no surprise to me, is that you've managed that in a way that's been professional, responsible, creative, and effective. The fact that satisfaction with services councils provide has increased over the last 5 years is an extraordinary reflection of your cool-headed efficiency. It reinforces my view that central government has much more to learn from local government than vice versa. And that view will characterize my approach to working with you all during the time ahead. So I want to thank every person in this hall for following the call of service to our communities, whether as a councillor, whether as an officer, or a member of the staff of the LGA. Local public service is a vocation, not a sideline, and it's not always given the respect that it absolutely deserves. We have thousands of colleagues in local government, from care assistants to traffic wardens, from financial experts to planning officers, and every one of them counts. Whatever your specific role in local government, all of you are contributing to a wider mission to make the lives of millions of people better, more secure, and more fulfilling than they otherwise would be. Making sure that vulnerable children are safe and cared for. And it's sad to record that we've lost David Bellotti from the local government family recently, from Bath and North East Somerset, who for years campaigned very effectively to make sure that children had a strong voice in this local government association. It's about making sure that our senior citizens live with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And on a happier note, it's wonderful that Elaine Atkinson from Poole was honoured received the OBE for her services to making sure that the elderly have that prominent and respected place in our affairs. Making sure that we always provide safety and hope for people, for example, fleeing from domestic violence. I don't know whether Anne Lucas is with us from Coventry here today. She has campaigned tirelessly in the LGA to make sure that a voice that could often not be heard as prominently and as strongly as it could be has been absolutely at the heart of local government. Giving young and old alike the chance to acquire new skills and knowledge throughout their lives. Striving consistently for a better future for the whole community is what we're about. And perhaps I can pay tribute on this occasion to Tony Jackson of East Herts, who stood down as leader of East Herts and as chairman of the East of England region of the LGA after a phenomenal career of public service. All of you, all of our colleagues back at home in our town halls and civic centres do that, and do it day in, day out. Can I pay particular tribute to David Sparks? I don't know whether David's here. It's hard to see here. There he is, front row. David, you had a particularly difficult year to be chair of the LGA. The year before a closely fought general election, as well, of course, as your responsibilities back at home. I think to do that, to govern and to lead a cross-party group in the year before a general election is a formidable diplomatic challenge, amongst other things. I don't know whether, if you've got time on your hand, you might have time to mediate between Greece and the Eurozone this weekend, but I think your skills might be much needed. But David, you've accomplished your leadership of the LGA with the independence and the calm authority that's characterized your service in local government. So I've had the privilege of negotiating and working with David over the years. So I think all of us are very grateful to David for the service that he's provided. Can I welcome my friend Gary Porter to the chair's role? I think it shows the extraordinary strength of local governments that the LGA can be successfully led by the leader of an urban metropolitan borough and then by one of the most rural districts in the country. It is fantastic. Gary is plain speaking, as you all know. In fact, I could even say he's pretty blunt. My experience is you shouldn't mess about with him. He probably is a pretty efficient guy. Every morning, Gary comes into the office and he makes a list of what he's going to do that day. And then he makes another list of the people that he's going to do it to. That said, even Gary went a bit pale when I first met him after his election that I was looking forward to working closely with him, because I think the last time I used those precise words were when he was chair of the Environment Board and asked him to work with me to write the National Planning Policy Framework, and that got him a bit of notoriety on the front page of the Daily Telegraph frequently, but they were happy days, but I'm looking forward very much to working with Gary. And speaking of plain speakers, I would like to pay tribute to my friend and predecessor, Sir Eric Pickles. Eric, I know, had a somewhat rumbustious relationship with many of you, and indeed with this meeting. But one thing stands out. Before it was fashionable, long before it was fashionable, Eric saw the opportunity for a new era of decentralisation. It was Eric that brought in the Localism Act and the General Power of Competence. He got rid of the ring fences that have constrained your discretion in the past. He abolished 4,700 performance targets that you were judged against, and for good measure, the Audit Commission that enforced many of them. The city deals and the local growth deals that I negotiated, I tell you, could not have happened without Eric's support. Eric is the godfather of localism. Even if, like Don Corleone, he occasionally made an offer you couldn't refuse. But I'm absolutely delighted to have the chance to continue his work. When at the reshuffle, I was called to Downing Street. The Prime Minister sat me down in the cabinet room and said, "Greg, I think I'm about to offer you your dream job." And he wasn't wrong. I'm excited about this job because I know what local government can do for our country. I met many of you here today. We met first when I negotiated the 28 city deals and the 39 local growth deals, traveling around every part of the country to negotiate them personally with you. As many of you recall, they weren't easy negotiations sometimes. I saw Paul Watson in the corridor earlier. Paul and I had some robust exchanges during the time of those negotiations. We went several rounds. But at the end of the day, we signed a deal that has galvanized, continued the fantastic prospects for Sunderland that now provides, in that one great city, more cars, in fact, from one factory than from the whole of the Italian motor industry in a single factory. I think we've got Izzy Seckham was here. Izzy and Anne Lucas and I negotiated the Coventry and Warwickshire deal. Very important in bringing people together to invest in the future of that part of the world. We had to convince my colleagues in government that this was the right way to proceed. And I had to show that every deal was in the national interest as well as in the local interest. But it worked, and it surpassed expectations, probably among some people here as well as in Whitehall. And this is our chance to take that work to the next level. And I'm very conscious, colleagues, standing here, that I wouldn't have the opportunity of being appointed to this very important role if it hadn't been for your willingness to talk to me, to work with me, irrespective of party affiliation over the last few years. You know, there's an old saying that if you go to a party, you should dance with the one that brung you. And I think that's true here. I won't forget the relationship that we forged and the work that we did together. And I will be your tireless advocate, fighting for our cause, our common cause, around the cabinet table and across Whitehall. And my team feel absolutely the same way. I'm very proud to have a ministerial team which is one of the strongest in the whole of government. Mark Francois, Brandon Lewis, Susan Williams, Marcus Jones, and James Wharton. And we have, can we take the lights up to shine the spotlight on my colleagues? Some of them with us today. So we've got Marcus, and we've got Mark, and we've got Brandon. Unfortunately, having the House of Commons sit with a small majority means we have to leave someone on duty just in case there's parliamentary business to attend to. So James drew the short straw today, and Susan Williams, Baroness Williams, known very well to all of you, is doing fantastic work in the House of Lords. Everyone of the ministerial team has been a local councillor, except for James, who, given he was already an MP by the age of 26, can perhaps be forgiven for that. And half of the team have been leaders of local authorities. In the months ahead, we'll be coming to meet you and your colleagues in your town halls and in your civic centres. We'll be taking your advice and building the relationships that we need to succeed in what is a shared endeavour. Let me talk about some of the areas in which I want us to work together especially closely, and which are, in fact, closely related to one another: housing, finance, and devolution. The basic condition of a community, it seems to me, is that successive generations of that community should be able to continue to be part of the community. Otherwise, they are, in effect, exiled. Exiled from their families, exiled from their roots, exiled from their shared history, and from each other. For centuries, to be exiled, to be sent away, was considered to be an extreme penalty reserved for the most serious offences against the community. Yet in many parts of the country, it's become normal for young people to leave their communities, and not out of choice. It might be to find work, but more and more, it's to find a home that they can afford. And it seems to me that if we want to maintain the chain of community and a place for the next generation, then we must make sure that we have the homes to welcome them to. The responsibility lies with us, national and local leaders alike. One of the achievements of neighbourhood plans is that when local people sit down to think about the future, often what they conclude is that more homes are needed for that next generation. The neighbourhood planning process has allowed them to use their knowledge of and love of their local communities to consider where and how homes can best be provided. In building more homes, communities must have the confidence that they will become better, not worse places to live as a result. And local authorities must be assured that in playing their part, playing your part, you won't be left out of pocket, indeed that you will share fully in the benefits. Now, a few moments ago, I said that I respect and admire the effective and the responsible way in which you've made the savings that were required of you to bring down our national deficit to half what it was. But to credit you with that acumen means I can't disguise, even if I wanted to, that there's more to come. I know, and you know, that whoever had been elected to govern in May, and whoever was the Secretary of State, there would be required further savings from local government. Across government, in-year cuts were made across most areas, but I and my colleagues were determined that the local government finance settlement for this year should not be reopened. It wasn't, and the savings that were made came from the central department and from the public health grant that has been rising in recent years. And I will always go on to argue hard for the most reasonable and advantageous settlement for local government. One that makes savings, but that does so in a transparent and an intelligent way. I realise that the pressures on local government, whether from an ageing population, a duty to guard our children against sexual exploitation, the need to help combat extremism, to name but three, all of these things need to be addressed seriously and rigorously, can't be swept under the carpet, including with the right level of resource. And an intelligent approach lies in recognising that while Whitehall may be organised along what officials might consider to be neat departmental lines, the needs of real people and their lives in real places is a very different matter. For example, as we all know, in the real world, health and social care are intensely related. People's health needs calling for care support, and the availability of that support determining what the NHS needs to provide. Jeremy Hunt, who you heard from yesterday, Jeremy and I are of the same mind. We must and will make sure that the NHS and local government work hand in hand for the good of our elderly and, of course, for our younger citizens. And in an era where local government has the right of initiative, the opportunity to do things differently is open to all of you, as the Greater Manchester Agreement on Healthcare demonstrates. When I negotiated city and local growth deals, I didn't pretend that I had a large pile of new cash to hand out. At a time when total resources in the public sector are shrinking, what I offered all of you was the chance to take a bigger slice of the funding that is available. And what's more, the opportunity to make it go further by managing it more creatively and using it to attract local private sector investment. You not only rose to the challenge, but you did so magnificently. The £7 billion of funds taken from central government departments became £21 billion worth of local investment. I now invite you all to rise to the challenge again, and on a grander scale. It's an invitation to every part of the country. As ever, that certainly includes our cities. Around the world, cities are the engines of national growth, and there's absolutely no reason why our great cities shouldn't be as effective as the cities right around the world. And as I've argued before, the most dynamic cities are led internationally by strong, decisive, visible mayors. In Chicago, Rahm Emanuel thought it was a better job to be mayor of that great city than to be chief of staff to the President of the United States. In France, national politicians often serve as local mayors and do so with great pride. And let's not forget our own history of inspiring civic leaders like Joseph Chamberlain. It was he who said, "Unless I can secure for the nation results similar to those which have followed the adoption of my policy in Birmingham, it would have been a sorry exchange to give up the town council for the nation's cabinet." But the glories of this nation don't just reside in our cities, but also in our counties, in our towns, and in our villages. These urban, suburban, and rural communities provide not just the stuff of our heritage, but of our future prosperity too. That's why the growth deals went beyond the geographical focus of the original city deals to embrace other areas too. Now, with the next stage of decentralization, I want to go much further. I want every place in the country to consider how you can assert your strengths and make your mark. We must be a nation of muscular communities, north and south, east and west, town and country. And I'd like to say something about the essentials for an ambitious deal. First, unity. One of the things that has, in my view, over many years, held back the decentralisation of power has been the fragmentation of local government. Too often differences between neighbours, whether side by side or upper and lower tier, have distracted from the shared interests that unite an area. These are the divisions that are being overcome and must be overcome. Some places have done it in the past through combined authorities, other through unitaries, other through mergers of functions. I'll never impose an arrangement, and neither can one tier impose its will on another tier. Rather, a local consensus will need to be agreed. I had thought that this might take some time, but it's been obvious from the conversations I've had at this conference, just in the last 24 hours, just what momentum there is already. Nick Rushton will forgive me by saying that I was summoned over to what turned out to be the Leicestershire table at a dinner I was at last night with Nick and his district colleagues, putting me under marching orders to say that we've agreed our proposal, now get on and implement it in central government. And this is happening in conversations right across the corridors and the meetings that we're having in this conference. And it's a thrill to see the momentum that has been established. I want to say something about business participation, because I think it's very important. In a few short years, the LEPs have guaranteed a strong voice for business in local leadership. At their best, business leaders have made an amazing contribution to their local areas, bringing employer knowledge of skills requirements, development opportunities, and entrepreneurship to complement the civic leadership of local councils. And so, as you develop your arrangements to take on powers from central government, I want you to continue to embrace business leaders. And I wouldn't expect to approve any deal that did not have a clear role for the local enterprise partnership. Let me talk a bit about ambition. The Cities and Local Government Devolution Bill is very wide in scope for those of you that have cast an eye over it. It allows any power other than powers to legislate, currently held by a minister or public body, to be devolved. The spending review provides an unmissable opportunity to show my colleagues in central government how the nation benefits, as well as local people, if things are done differently. What are the advantages for local communities of concluding such a deal? Well, I think it's a chance of a lifetime to direct the future economic prosperity and the social flourishing of your area, to make life better for even more people than you do now. The ability in difficult economic times to take control of your future and your destiny. It's only fair that those who are prepared to organise to be more effective and more efficient should be able to reap substantially the rewards of that boldness, whether in costs saved, additional revenues generated, or in powers that can be vested. The opportunity to take decisions in your town halls on matters from transport to skills, from health to welfare, that over, as Michael Heseltine said earlier in the week, over 100 years have been taken away from you and put into the hands of people often hundreds of miles away and with a fraction of your local experience. You've told me that you can do things better. I've always known that. So why wait? Why miss your chance to break free? 2,400 years ago, Plato wrote, "The heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior to yourself." The ability of people in this hall is beyond doubt. Your superior knowledge of local needs, beyond argument. It's your community, your future. So take power now. Let's make this opportunity count. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to come and address you today.
Can we raise the house light so I can see who the audience is, and we can and Greg's going to answer some questions. I'm going to do two series of 3 questions each, if I can't see the audience. Okay. Right, and the man in the shirt behind the gentleman, you'll do it? Yeah, whoever that is. Yep.
David, you're going to regret that choice, I have to tell you.
Excuse me, Chairman's prerogative. Go away from him.
Martin Ted, leader of Buckinghamshire County Council. First of all, I've got to say, Greg, inspiring speech, real radical change, and you've got a great team with you, and we're really looking forward, I think, collectively in local government to working with you all. So great, thank you very much indeed. My question is about finance, which you touched upon. A lot of us in local government recognise we're going to be in the front line of the cuts that are going to be coming up. A lot of us accept that's in the national interest. But we're facing big challenges, particularly in adult social care, children's services with high growth and high costs. What we really need is certainty over the next 5 years in terms of the sort of settlements we're going to get and the sort of council tax increases that we can actually budget for. That will enable us to actually plan the future and deliver the savings the country needs. What can you do to help us do that?
Okay, and the next one, where are we? Yep. Number 4, please.
Peter Thornton, South Lakeland District Council. Greg, you've spoken very powerfully about localism and about housing. Will you consider giving your locally elected councils the right to decide whether they sell off or keep their social housing?
Okay, number 1. I can't see it, but I know it's just behind her. Yeah, number 1, please.
Greg, I'm encouraged to hear that presumably you're not the next generation of the Godfather. But would you give an assurance to Cambridge that, recognising the powerhouse that it is, that could form the centre of governance? And also, why should we want a mayoral model when our experience to date has been of the Police and Crime Commissioner of Cambridgeshire?
Listen, let me take 3 points at a time. So Martin's point he mentioned adult social care, but it applies to other budgets as well. I know from my experience as a cabinet member in local governments that actually having some long-term certainty as to what resources you have to contend with is, if it doesn't exactly sort of solve the dilemmas that you have, at least it allows you to plan ahead, and sometimes that can allow you to be more effective than otherwise. So I've known that in the past, and conversations I've had around this place over the last 24 hours have reinforced that. I think there is a case for future certainty as to what your budgets and what your ability to raise finance should be. Whether that can be negotiated through part of these devolution arrangements or whether it can be general, that is, I've received my marching orders from you, and when we come to our spending review discussions, I will very clearly reflect the case for that, including the local, the national advantages as well as the local advantages. To Peter's point on social housing, I think it's right, and the right to buy has been available obviously for many decades now, and many people have been able to achieve their aspiration and their dream of owning their own home through that policy. I think it has been a successful policy. Where I think in the past it was an incomplete policy is where councils were restrained from building and replacing that stock. And I think the lesson has been learned from that. And one of our commitments that we've made, very clear in the manifesto, is yes, to extend the opportunity that the right to buy offers, but absolutely to require that a home is built in addition to the one that is being sold. And that can help our broader objective that I think we all feel so passionately about, that we do need to address this under-provision of housing of all sorts. When it comes to Cambridge, the arrangements that you put forward, I think, should come from the powers that you ask for. I think the right thing, if I were to give some advice to you as you're putting forward your proposals to government, is to think about what powers you would want. To think about what budgets that are currently tied up in Whitehall that would be more effective if they were in your hands. And then from that, think about the governance that is required for it. And what George Osborne has said for our big cities is that the scale of the ambition that we have, the possibility of taking really significant budgets and powers from being in the hands of ministers, literally individuals, the Secretary of State, whether it's me, whether it's the Transport Secretary, whether it's the Work and Pension Secretary. We want to put them in local hands. If you do that on that scale that we think is certainly possible in the big cities, then you need, for those powers coming from central government, you need to have an equivalent mandate and visibility to discharge them. And that's why George said that we won't settle for less than a mayor, for that full-blown set of devolved powers to our big cities. But I think if you think about what powers you want, think about the proposal that you're going to make to central government, and then see what follows from that in terms of the strengthened governance that's required to discharge those powers. Let's take some more.
Okay, number 2, and when you finish with that, could you come down to the front row? There, okay? Number 2, please.
Greg, Roger Blaney, leader at Newark and Sherwood District Council. The Chancellor has become the champion of the Northern Powerhouse, and that's very welcome. But could I invite you and all of your team to become the champions of the Midlands engine, the united vision of the 11 LEPs across the West and East Midlands, so that we can ourselves develop a growth prospectus, potentially for inclusion in this year's autumn statement, and ensure that the rebalancing of the economy is truly national.
Okay, number 4, please.
Thanks. My name's Andy Hull from Islington Council. I'd like to ask Greg Clark what he thinks it says about the state of the country's senior leadership on local government, that of the 7 people on the panel this afternoon, the only one who isn't a middle-aged white man is the sound engineer.
Excuse me, I'm actually the youngest on the panel. Okay, and then number 1, thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the new Minister and his team. Minister, you've mentioned about the challenges and the risks that we have in the future. Oh, by the way, I'm Councillor Dave Rassi. I'm the Chair of Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority and also the Chair of the North West Fire and Rescue Forum. So obviously, my question is fire service related. One of the things that you will know is that the change in the risk profile within the country, and part of that is the ageing population, the independent living, the increase in mental health issues, dementia, as well as the fire and rescue services ability to carry out further prevention work with the reduced resources. Also, the present and current terrorist threat that the country faces. So we need to ensure that we are ready in the event of any disaster. I am concerned, Minister, about the cuts to the fire and rescue service, as you can imagine. What I'd like you to take back, Minister, is that when the Chancellor makes his statement on the 8th of July, that they take into consideration all these risks and challenges that the fire and rescue services needs to ensure to protect our communities. And that when you do that, you undertake a full risk assessment of the impact of the cuts to the fire and rescue service to date. Thank you.
Well, let me pick up the points. So, Roger, on the Midlands. I mean, I hope it's been clear from what I've said that, absolutely vital, though the Northern Powerhouse is, and someone born and bred in Middlesbrough will always want to see the North doing well. The national interest is that all parts of the country are forging ahead. We literally need to be. If you look at countries like Germany, you've got every part of the country contributing to the prosperity of that country. There isn't the degree of imbalances that we've had in the past. And for heaven's sake, the Midlands, absolutely. It's not just its heritage, formidable though that is, but the current dynamism that is there in the advanced manufacturing and in the high-tech sectors in the Midlands. This is one of our absolutely vital engines of growth. In my previous role, I was the universities minister, and the universities in the Midlands is a network that many other countries would kill to have, the strength of higher education there. So it is absolutely part of it. I know that discussions are proceeding apace on what will be the proposal from the West Midlands, whether as a totality or different parts of it. No place is alike, that is obvious, and the right thing is for you and your colleagues and neighbours to decide what's the best arrangement on that. I'm very fortunate in having a Midlands MP in Marcus here. He will be available to you to have those discussions, to give you whatever guidance you need, but from a point of view of real enthusiasm to make that happen. It's inconceivable that the Midlands will not be one of the strongest parts of this devolved settlement that we're moving towards. To Andy's observation, listen, I said that Susan Williams was not here, and she is a hugely important member of the team. She's taking forward the cities and local government bill through the House of Lords. She's one of the local government family. She was a highly effective leader of Trafford Council, as many of you know, has been intimately involved in this agenda for many years, and it is. I'm thrilled that we have her with us. I think it's fair to reflect that in Parliament we have been too slow to reflect the makeup of the population. We've made great strides both at this election and the appointment of the cabinet. Clearly, we've got further to do, but I think we've got as I say, a team that is very high caliber, and even the members that are not here, I think, would recognise that together, I think we can do a lot with each other. On the fire and rescue issues, I mean, I said, and I was explicit, there are clearly cuts that are going to need to be made across the public sector, but I made a commitment to you that I would deal with them intelligently, to talk to you, to understand, from your expertise and your knowledge, what are the particular sensitivities, what things should be avoided, and to find ways in which we can do it best. Mark Francois, my colleague, has met with the FBU. In fact, I think you went to FBU headquarters, did you not, to have a meeting?
Yes.
Just a few days ago, and has sat down with Matt to start to have those conversations. They will continue. I don't want to mislead you into thinking, any of you, that it's all going to be plain sailing, but I promise you this: you will have a respectful and considered relationship and dialogue with us, so that we do the best that we possibly can together for local government and therefore for our citizens.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to show your appreciation to Secretary of State?